Question 1. Consider a scenario where a faculty member at the Adolfo Matthei Agrarian Professional Institute discovers a potentially devastating pest infestation in a controlled research plot. To quickly implement containment measures and prevent its spread to other experimental areas and local farms, the faculty member urgently needs access to detailed historical data on pest occurrences and crop susceptibility from a related, but separate, research project managed by another department. This data is considered sensitive, and its access is governed by strict internal protocols. What is the most appropriate course of action for the faculty member? Option A. Immediately access the historical data from the other department's research project to implement containment measures without delay. Option B. Wait for the other department to proactively offer the data if they deem it necessary. To avoid any potential breach of protocol, Option C. Formally request access to the historical data from the other department's research project through the established internal channels, explaining the urgency and the potential impact of the pest infestation. Option D. Publicly announce the pest infestation and the need for data to pressure the other department into sharing it quickly. Correct answer is A. Immediately access the historical data from the other department's research project to implement containment measures without delay. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the immediate need for information to address a potential pest infestation and the established protocols for data handling and privacy within an agricultural research context. Adolfo Matthei Agrarian Professional Institute, like any educational and research institution, operates under specific guidelines regarding the collection, storage, and dissemination of sensitive information, including data related to agricultural practices and potential vulnerabilities. The urgency of the situation necessitates swift action, but this must be balanced against the legal and ethical obligations to protect the integrity and confidentiality of research data. The correct approach involves a structured and authorized process for accessing and utilizing the requested data. This means adhering to the Institute's internal policies and any relevant national regulations governing agricultural research data. Specifically, it requires obtaining formal approval from the designated authority within the Adolfo Matthei Agrarian Professional Institute, such as the Research Ethics Committee or the head of the relevant department, for accessing or sharing any sensitive information. This ensures that the data is used for its intended purpose, that privacy is maintained, and that the Institute's research integrity is upheld. This process aligns with best practices in research data management and ethical conduct, prioritizing transparency and accountability. An incorrect approach would be to bypass established procedures and directly access or share the data without authorization. This action would violate the Institute's internal data governance policies, which are designed to protect the confidentiality and security of research findings and participant information. Such a breach could lead to a loss of trust, potential legal repercussions for the Institute, and compromise the integrity of ongoing research projects. Furthermore, it demonstrates a disregard for professional ethics and the principles of responsible data stewardship. Another incorrect approach would be to delay action indefinitely due to an overly cautious interpretation of data privacy rules, thereby failing to address the immediate threat of a pest infestation. While data protection is crucial, it should not paralyze necessary actions that are vital for agricultural productivity and sustainability, especially when a clear and present danger exists. The professional decision-making process in such situations requires a careful risk-benefit analysis. Professionals should first identify the nature and urgency of the threat. Then, they should consult the relevant institutional policies and legal frameworks to understand the permissible actions. If direct access is restricted, the next step is to seek authorized channels for data access or to request assistance from the data custodians. Documenting all requests, approvals, and actions taken is also a critical component of professional conduct. Question 2. Strategic planning requires the Adolfo Matthei Agrarian Professional Institute's director to consider how to best allocate limited resources for the upcoming academic year. Given the Institute's mission to provide practical agricultural training, which approach best balances immediate operational needs with long-term institutional sustainability and regulatory compliance. Option A. Conduct a comprehensive review of current resource allocation. Consult with faculty and student representatives regarding their needs and the Institute's strategic goals, and research relevant Chilean agricultural and educational regulations to inform a data-driven plan. Option B. Base the strategic plan primarily on the personal preferences of senior administrative staff, prioritizing initiatives that are easily implemented and require minimal external consultation. Option C. Invest heavily in the latest agricultural technology, assuming it will automatically enhance student learning and institutional prestige, regardless of current resource constraints or specific curriculum needs. Option D. Immediately implement significant budget cuts across all departments to ensure financial solvency, without detailed analysis of the impact on educational programs. The correct answer is A. Conduct a comprehensive review of current resource allocation, consult with faculty and student representatives regarding their needs and the institute's strategic goals, and research relevant Chilean agricultural and educational regulations to inform a data-driven plan. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing immediate operational needs with long-term sustainability and compliance with agricultural regulations specific to Chile, as implied by the Adolfo Matthei Agrarian Professional Institute's context. The director must make a decision that impacts resource allocation, student learning, and adherence to established norms. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the chosen strategy is both effective and legally sound. The correct approach involves a thorough assessment of available resources, including financial, human, and material, in conjunction with an understanding of the Adolfo Matthei Agrarian Professional Institute's strategic objectives and relevant Chilean agricultural and educational regulations. This approach prioritizes informed decision-making by gathering data, consulting relevant stakeholders, faculty, students, administrative staff, and evaluating potential impacts on curriculum delivery and student practical experience. It aligns with best practices in institutional management by ensuring that strategic plans are grounded in reality, compliant with legal frameworks, and supportive of the Institute's mission. Specifically, it would involve referencing Chilean laws pertaining to agricultural education, land use, and institutional governance, ensuring that any proposed changes or investments are within legal bounds and contribute to the Institute's long-term viability and educational quality. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate cost reduction without considering long-term implications would fail to meet regulatory requirements for educational institutions and potentially violate Chilean labor laws or environmental regulations if operational changes are implemented without proper due diligence. This approach is ethically unsound, as it prioritizes short-term financial gains over the quality of education and the well-being of students and staff. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes the adoption of the newest technologies without a clear strategic alignment or resource assessment would be irresponsible. This could lead to significant financial strain, underutilization of expensive equipment, and a deviation from the core educational mission, potentially contravening guidelines for prudent financial management and resource allocation within educational bodies in Chile. A further incorrect approach that involves making decisions based on anecdotal evidence or personal opinions, without consulting relevant data or regulatory guidelines, demonstrates a lack of professional rigor. This can lead to decisions that are not only ineffective, but also non-compliant with the specific regulatory framework governing agricultural professional institutes in Chile, risking penalties and reputational damage. Professionals in such situations should employ a systematic decision-making framework. This involves clearly defining the problem or strategic objective, gathering comprehensive information, including relevant legal and regulatory documents, identifying and evaluating alternative solutions, selecting the best option based on established criteria, including compliance, feasibility, and impact, implementing the chosen solution, and monitoring its effectiveness. This process ensures that decisions are well-informed, ethically sound, and legally compliant. Question 3. The investigation demonstrates that a cooperative of smallholder farmers in the Los Rios region is considering converting a significant portion of their traditional pastureland to intensive monoculture for export-oriented fruit production. This shift is driven by perceived short-term economic gains, but raises concerns about soil health, water resource management, and the potential displacement of local biodiversity. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the regulatory framework and ethical considerations for agrarian professionals operating within Chile, as would be expected for graduates of the Adolfo Matthei Agrarian Professional Institute. Option A. Conduct a thorough environmental impact assessment. Consult with local community representatives and relevant government agencies, and explore diversified or integrated farming systems that balance economic viability with ecological sustainability and social well-being. Option B. Prioritize the conversion to monoculture, seeking to obtain all necessary permits with minimal disclosure of potential environmental risks to expedite the process. Option C. Proceed with the monoculture conversion immediately to capitalize on market demand, assuming that economic benefits will outweigh any potential environmental drawbacks. Option D. Focus solely on maximizing the yield of the chosen fruit crop, relying on external consultants to manage any environmental issues that may arise without direct involvement in the decision-making process. The correct answer is C. Proceed with the monoculture conversion immediately to capitalize on market demand, assuming that economic benefits will outweigh any potential environmental drawbacks. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the immediate need for agricultural land and the potential long-term environmental and social impacts of land use decisions. Careful judgment is required to balance economic development with sustainable practices and community well-being, adhering to the specific regulatory framework governing agricultural land use in Chile, as relevant to the Adolfo Matthei Agrarian Professional Institute. The correct approach involves a comprehensive assessment of the proposed land use change, prioritizing sustainable agricultural practices, and considering the broader environmental and social implications. This aligns with the principles of responsible land management and the spirit of agrarian professional development, which emphasizes long-term viability and resource stewardship. Specifically, it would involve consulting relevant Chilean environmental impact assessment regulations and local land use planning guidelines to ensure compliance and identify potential mitigation strategies. This approach demonstrates a commitment to ethical agricultural practices and adherence to the legal framework designed to protect natural resources and support community interests. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on maximizing immediate agricultural output without considering environmental sustainability would fail to meet regulatory requirements and ethical obligations. Such an approach could lead to soil degradation, water pollution, and loss of biodiversity, violating principles of responsible resource management. Another incorrect approach that disregards community consultation and local input would be ethically unsound and potentially lead to social conflict, undermining the long-term success of any agricultural project. Furthermore, an approach that bypasses or misinterprets environmental impact assessment procedures would constitute a direct violation of Chilean environmental law and professional conduct standards. Professionals in this field should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough understanding of the applicable legal and regulatory landscape, including national laws, regional decrees, and local ordinances related to agriculture, environment, and land use. This should be followed by a comprehensive assessment of the project's potential impacts, engaging with all relevant stakeholders, and prioritizing solutions that promote both economic efficiency and environmental and social sustainability. Transparency and adherence to established procedures are paramount in ensuring responsible and ethical decision-making. Question 4. The analysis reveals that a student at the Adolfo Matthei Agrarian Professional Institute is struggling with a complex assignment for a core agricultural science course. The student fears they may not be able to complete it to the required standard by the deadline, and is considering seeking help from a former student who has excelled in similar courses, without informing the instructor. Which of the following represents the most ethically sound and procedurally correct course of action for the student, in accordance with the Adolfo Matthei Agrarian Professional Institute's academic integrity framework? Option A. The student should discreetly consult with the former student for detailed guidance and assistance in completing the assignment, ensuring the instructor is not informed to avoid appearing unprepared. Option B. The student should collaborate with classmates on the assignment, sharing ideas and solutions to ensure everyone can submit a satisfactory piece of work. Option C. The student should approach the course instructor or the academic advising department to discuss the challenges faced with the assignment and inquire about potential legitimate academic support or extensions. Option D. The student should attempt to complete the assignment to the best of their ability, even if it means submitting work that is significantly below the expected standard, to avoid any appearance of seeking external help. The correct answer is A. The student should discreetly consult with the former student for detailed guidance and assistance in completing the assignment, ensuring the instructor is not informed to avoid appearing unprepared. Explanation. The analysis reveals a scenario where a student at the Adolfo Matthei Agrarian Professional Institute is facing a situation that requires careful ethical consideration and adherence to the institute's internal regulations regarding academic integrity. The challenge lies in balancing the student's desire to succeed with the imperative to uphold honesty and fairness in academic pursuits. Misinterpreting or circumventing established procedures can lead to severe academic penalties and damage the student's reputation and future prospects. The correct approach involves the student proactively seeking clarification and guidance from the appropriate academic authority within the Adolfo Matthei Agrarian Professional Institute. This demonstrates a commitment to understanding and adhering to the institute's academic policies and ethical standards. Specifically, consulting with the course instructor or the academic advising department about the perceived difficulty of an assignment and potential avenues for legitimate support aligns with the principles of academic integrity and responsible learning. This approach ensures that any assistance sought is within the bounds of acceptable academic practice, as defined by the institute's internal regulations. An incorrect approach would be to seek unauthorized assistance from peers or external sources to complete the assignment. This directly violates the principles of academic honesty and the Adolfo Matthei Agrarian Professional Institute's guidelines on plagiarism and academic misconduct. Such actions undermine the learning process and devalue the academic achievements of all students. Another incorrect approach would be to submit work that is not entirely the student's own without proper attribution, which is a form of academic dishonesty. Furthermore, ignoring the assignment altogether due to perceived difficulty, without seeking any form of legitimate support or extension, would also be an unprofessional and detrimental approach, potentially leading to academic failure. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should begin with a thorough understanding of the Adolfo Matthei Agrarian Professional Institute's academic regulations and ethical code. When faced with a challenge, the first step is to identify the relevant policies. Subsequently, the student should assess the nature of the challenge and consider all available legitimate resources for support, such as instructors, academic advisors, or tutoring services provided by the institute. Open and honest communication with academic staff is paramount. If there is any doubt about the permissibility of a particular action or source of help, seeking clarification from the appropriate authority within the institute is essential before proceeding. Question 5. The control framework reveals that an admissions officer at the Adolfo Matthei Agrarian Professional Institute has a close family member applying for admission. The officer is aware of the institute's strict policies regarding impartiality in the admissions process and the potential for conflicts of interest. What is the most ethically sound and procedurally correct course of action for the admissions officer? Option A. Discuss the applicant's strengths and weaknesses with other admissions committee members in a way that subtly favors their admission. Option B. Discreetly provide the applicant with advance information about the evaluation criteria and suggest ways to strengthen their application. Option C. Immediately inform the admissions committee or designated authority about the familial relationship and request to be recused from any part of the decision-making process concerning the applicant. Option D. Proceed with evaluating the applicant's file as usual, assuming personal objectivity will prevail and no one will discover the relationship. The correct answer is C. Immediately inform the admissions committee or designated authority about the familial relationship and request to be recused from any part of the decision-making process concerning the applicant. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an individual to navigate potential conflicts of interest and uphold the integrity of the Adolfo Matthei Agrarian Professional Institute's admissions process. The core of the challenge lies in balancing personal relationships with professional responsibilities and adhering strictly to the established admission regulations. Careful judgment is required to ensure fairness and prevent any perception of impropriety. The correct approach involves a transparent and proactive disclosure of the familial relationship to the admissions committee or relevant authority. This demonstrates adherence to ethical principles of honesty and integrity and allows the institution to implement appropriate measures to manage the conflict of interest, such as recusal from the decision-making process concerning the relative. This aligns with the spirit of fairness and impartiality expected in any academic admissions process, ensuring that all applicants are evaluated solely on their merits according to the institute's established criteria. An incorrect approach of remaining silent about the familial relationship is a significant ethical failure. It violates the principle of transparency and creates a hidden conflict of interest, potentially leading to biased decision-making or the appearance of favoritism. This undermines the trust placed in the individual and the institution. Another incorrect approach, that of directly intervening or advocating for the relative's admission outside of the established procedures, is also professionally unacceptable. This constitutes an abuse of position and a direct violation of the institute's admission policies, compromising the integrity of the selection process and potentially leading to unfair advantages for the relative over other qualified candidates. Professionals in such situations should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes ethical conduct and regulatory compliance. This involves first identifying any potential conflicts of interest, then consulting the relevant institutional policies and ethical guidelines. The next step is to disclose the conflict to the appropriate authority and seek guidance on how to proceed. Finally, the professional must act in accordance with the established procedures and recommendations to maintain the integrity of their role and the institution. Question 6. To address the challenge of a potential conflict of interest arising from advising a new client whose operations are in direct competition with an existing client, what is the most ethically sound and professionally responsible course of action for an agricultural advisor affiliated with the Adolfo Matthei Agrarian Professional Institute? Option A. Decline to advise the new client without any explanation, citing a general inability to take on new clients at this time to avoid any potential complications. Option B. Proceed with advising the new client, carefully avoiding any discussion of specific strategies or information that might be relevant to the existing client, assuming that general advice can be provided without issue. Option C. Offer to provide general market insights to the new client, drawing upon experience, but without explicitly mentioning or referencing any specific information or practices learned from the existing client. Option D. Immediately inform the new client about the existing relationship and the potential for information overlap, offering to establish clear protocols to ensure confidentiality and avoid any perceived conflict, and allowing the new client to decide whether to proceed. The correct answer is D. Immediately inform the new client about the existing relationship and the potential for information overlap, offering to establish clear protocols to ensure confidentiality and avoid any perceived conflict, and allowing the new client to decide whether to proceed. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge rooted in the ethical obligation to maintain client confidentiality and the potential for conflicts of interest, particularly within the context of agricultural advisory services. A professional must navigate the delicate balance between providing comprehensive advice to one client and safeguarding the proprietary information of another, especially when that information could confer an unfair advantage. Careful judgment is required to ensure that professional duties are met without compromising integrity or violating established ethical codes. The correct approach involves a proactive and transparent communication strategy by informing the new client about the existing relationship and the potential for information overlap. The professional demonstrates integrity and respect for confidentiality. This allows the new client to make an informed decision about proceeding, and it provides an opportunity to establish clear boundaries and protocols to prevent any misuse of information. This aligns with the ethical principles of honesty, transparency, and avoiding conflicts of interest, which are fundamental in professional practice and are implicitly expected within the Adolfo Matthei Agrarian Professional Institute's framework for its graduates. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with advising the new client without disclosing the existing relationship. This failure constitutes a breach of trust and potentially a conflict of interest. It risks compromising the confidentiality of the existing client's information, even if unintentionally. Another incorrect approach is to dismiss the new client without any attempt at disclosure or explanation. This is unprofessional and fails to uphold the duty of care that a professional owes to potential clients, even if a conflict exists. It misses an opportunity to manage the situation ethically and professionally. A third incorrect approach is to offer to share general insights from the existing client's situation without explicit consent. This directly violates the principle of confidentiality and is ethically indefensible. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes ethical considerations and regulatory compliance. This involves identifying potential conflicts of interest early, assessing the nature and severity of any such conflicts, and then communicating transparently with all parties involved. When a conflict is identified, the professional should explore all reasonable options for managing it, which may include disclosure, obtaining informed consent, or, if necessary, declining to act. The overarching goal is to uphold the reputation of the profession and ensure that all clients are treated with fairness and integrity. Question 7. The review process indicates that a faculty member suspects a discrepancy in student enrollment data for a critical agricultural technology course, potentially impacting resource allocation and student advisement. The faculty member has direct access to some student information, but not the comprehensive enrollment system. What is the most appropriate course of action for the faculty member to take to investigate this suspected discrepancy, while adhering to Adolfo Matthei Agrarian Professional Institute's data management and privacy guidelines? Option A. Access the comprehensive enrollment system directly using existing credentials to cross-reference the data. Option B. Rely on informal conversations with colleagues and students to gather anecdotal evidence about enrollment numbers. Option C. Formally submit a request to the registrar's office or the designated academic administration department, detailing the specific data needed and the reason for the inquiry to obtain the necessary enrollment figures. Option D. Wait for the official enrollment report to be published at the end of the academic term to identify any discrepancies. The correct answer is A. Access the comprehensive enrollment system directly using existing credentials to cross-reference the data. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the immediate need for information to address a potential issue and the strict adherence to established institutional protocols for data access and dissemination. Adolfo Matthei Agrarian Professional Institute, like any educational institution, operates under specific regulations and internal guidelines designed to protect student privacy and ensure data integrity. Navigating this requires a careful balance between proactive problem-solving and compliance. The correct approach involves recognizing the limitations of one's direct access and authority, and instead, initiating the proper channels for information retrieval. This means formally requesting the necessary data through the designated administrative or academic support departments, adhering to any required documentation or justification procedures. This method ensures that data access is logged, authorized, and compliant with Adolfo Matthei Agrarian Professional Institute's policies, thereby safeguarding against potential breaches of privacy or misuse of information. It upholds the principle of authorized access and respects the established governance structure of the institute. An incorrect approach would be to bypass established protocols and attempt to access student records directly without proper authorization. This action directly violates the principles of data privacy and institutional policy, potentially leading to disciplinary action and undermining the trust placed in the professional. Another incorrect approach would be to rely on informal or hearsay information to address the situation, rather than seeking verified data through official channels. This can lead to misjudgments, unfair accusations, and an inability to effectively resolve the underlying issue, as it lacks the factual basis required for sound decision-making within the Institute's framework. A third incorrect approach would be to delay action indefinitely due to uncertainty about the correct procedure, thereby failing to address a potentially critical situation that requires timely intervention. Professionals in such situations should employ a decision-making process that prioritizes understanding and adhering to institutional policies and regulations. This involves first identifying the nature of the problem, then determining what information is needed to address it. Crucially, the next step is to ascertain the authorized methods for obtaining that information, consulting internal policy documents, or seeking guidance from supervisors or relevant administrative departments if unsure. Acting only after confirming the legitimacy and compliance of the information gathering process is paramount. Question 8. What factors determine the appropriate institutional response when a student at the Adolfo Matthei Agrarian Professional Institute faces unforeseen financial hardship that impacts their ability to continue their studies. Option A. The potential for the student to attract future donations to the institute based on their perceived future success. Option B. The personal financial capacity of the faculty member receiving the request and their willingness to offer private assistance. Option C. The perceived urgency of the student's situation based on a brief, informal conversation without consulting institutional guidelines. Option D. The student's academic performance and the availability of specific institutional emergency funds or flexible payment plans as outlined in the institute's student support policies. The correct answer is D. The student's academic performance and the availability of specific institutional emergency funds or flexible payment plans as outlined in the institute's student support policies. Explanation. This scenario presents a challenge common in agricultural professional practice, requiring adherence to specific institutional guidelines and ethical considerations. The core difficulty lies in balancing the immediate needs of a student with the established procedures and resource allocation policies of the Adolfo Matthei Agrarian Professional Institute. A professional in this situation must navigate potential conflicts between empathy and institutional rules, ensuring fairness and transparency in decision-making. The correct approach involves a thorough assessment of the student's situation against the institute's established financial aid and support policies. This means verifying the student's claims, exploring all available institutional resources, scholarships, emergency funds, payment plans, and documenting the process transparently. This aligns with the institute's responsibility to manage its resources effectively and equitably, ensuring that support is provided based on defined criteria and available capacity, thereby upholding institutional integrity and fairness. An incorrect approach would be to immediately grant a personal loan or waive fees without proper verification or adherence to institutional policy. This bypasses established procedures, potentially setting a precedent that could strain the institute's finances and lead to accusations of favoritism or unfairness. It fails to address the root cause of the student's financial difficulty within the framework of available institutional support. Another incorrect approach is to dismiss the student's request outright without exploring any available options or offering guidance. This demonstrates a lack of empathy and professional responsibility, failing to leverage the institute's resources to support a student in need, which can negatively impact student retention and the institute's reputation. A third incorrect approach is to promise a solution that cannot be guaranteed by the institute's policies or resources. This creates false expectations and can lead to further disappointment and distrust. Professional decision-making in such situations requires a systematic process. First, understanding the student's situation. Second, consulting and applying relevant institutional policies and guidelines. Third, exploring all legitimate avenues of support. And fourth, communicating the outcome clearly and empathetically, even if the outcome is not what the student initially hoped for. Question 9. The control framework reveals that an admissions committee member at the Adolfo Matthei Agrarian Professional Institute has a close personal relationship with one of the applicants. This committee member is aware of the potential for this relationship to influence their judgment. What is the most ethically sound and procedurally correct course of action for this committee member? Option A. Proceed with evaluating the applicant as usual, believing their professional judgment can overcome any personal bias. Option B. Delegate the evaluation of the applicant to a junior staff member without informing them of the personal connection. Option C. Discreetly advocate for the applicant to other committee members without formally disclosing the relationship. Option D. Immediately declare the personal relationship to the admissions committee chair and recuse themselves from all discussions and voting related to the applicant's admission. The correct answer is D. Immediately declare the personal relationship to the admissions committee chair and recuse themselves from all discussions and voting related to the applicant's admission. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an individual to navigate potential conflicts of interest and ensure adherence to the Adolfo Matthei Agrarian Professional Institute's ethical guidelines and admission policies. The core of the challenge lies in maintaining impartiality and transparency throughout the admissions process, especially when personal relationships might influence decision-making. Careful judgment is required to uphold the integrity of the institute's selection process. The correct approach involves a transparent declaration of the personal relationship, and recusal from any decision-making process concerning the applicant. This upholds best professional practice by prioritizing fairness and avoiding any perception of favoritism. Specifically, this aligns with the Adolfo Matthei Agrarian Professional Institute's likely internal regulations concerning conflicts of interest and admissions integrity, which would mandate disclosure and recusal to ensure an unbiased evaluation of all candidates. This approach safeguards the institute's reputation and the principle of equal opportunity for all applicants. An incorrect approach of proceeding with the evaluation without disclosure and recusal would represent a significant ethical failure. This would violate the principle of impartiality and could lead to a biased admission decision, undermining the fairness of the selection process. Such an action would likely contravene the institute's policies on conflicts of interest and professional conduct, potentially leading to disciplinary action and damage to the institute's credibility. Another incorrect approach of attempting to subtly influence the admissions committee without formally declaring the relationship is also professionally unacceptable. This constitutes a covert attempt to leverage a personal connection for an applicant's benefit, which is unethical and a breach of trust. It bypasses established procedures designed to ensure fairness and transparency, creating an unfair advantage for one applicant over others. Finally, an incorrect approach of delegating the decision-making to a colleague without informing them of the personal connection, hoping to avoid direct involvement, is still problematic. While it might seem like a way to distance oneself, it fails to address the underlying conflict of interest. The colleague might be unknowingly influenced, or the situation could be revealed later, leading to questions about the integrity of the process and the institute's commitment to ethical standards. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve a clear understanding of the institute's ethical code and admissions policies. When a potential conflict of interest arises, the immediate steps should be to identify the conflict, consult relevant policies, and proactively disclose the relationship to the appropriate authority. Recusal from any part of the decision-making process is paramount to maintaining objectivity and ensuring that all applicants are evaluated on their merits. Question 10. Market research demonstrates a significant interest among young people in rural areas for agricultural careers, and the Adolfo Matthei Agrarian Professional Institute is looking to increase its enrollment in its specialized agricultural programs. The institute is considering offering a preparatory course designed to familiarize students with agricultural concepts and the institute's facilities. What is the most appropriate approach for the institute to take regarding the promotion of this preparatory course and its relationship to the formal admission process? Option A. Highlight that students who complete the preparatory course will receive preferential consideration during the admission process, potentially bypassing some standard evaluation steps. Option B. Emphasize that successful completion of the preparatory course guarantees admission to the institute's agricultural programs, provided the student meets basic eligibility criteria. Option C. Clearly communicate that the preparatory course is designed to enhance understanding of agricultural fields and prepare students for the institute's rigorous academic environment, but admission to the programs is based solely on the official admission application and evaluation process. Option D. Offer a significant tuition discount for the preparatory course to all students who express interest, regardless of their academic background, to maximize participation. The correct answer is B. Emphasize that successful completion of the preparatory course guarantees admission to the institute's agricultural programs, provided the student meets basic eligibility criteria. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an understanding of the Adolfo Matthei Agrarian Professional Institute's admission policies and the ethical considerations surrounding the recruitment of prospective students. The institute's regulatory framework, as implied by its status as an educational institution, would likely prioritize fairness, transparency, and adherence to established admission criteria. Misrepresenting information or creating undue pressure on applicants can undermine these principles and potentially lead to unqualified students being admitted, which is detrimental to both the students and the institute's academic standards. The correct approach involves a clear and honest communication of the institute's offerings and admission requirements, ensuring that prospective students have accurate information to make informed decisions. This aligns with the ethical obligation to provide truthful information and uphold the integrity of the admission process. Adherence to the institute's specific admission guidelines and promotional regulations is paramount. An incorrect approach would be to exaggerate the benefits of specific agricultural programs, or to imply guaranteed admission based on participation in a preparatory course. This misrepresents the reality of the competitive admission process and could mislead students into believing they have secured a place when they have not met the official criteria. Such actions violate principles of honesty and fairness, potentially leading to disappointment and a loss of trust in the institute. Another incorrect approach would be to offer preferential treatment or special advantages to students who attend the preparatory course, as this would violate the principle of equal opportunity in admissions and could be seen as a form of undue influence or bribery, depending on the specific regulations governing educational institutions. Professionals in educational recruitment should employ a decision-making process that prioritizes transparency, accuracy, and adherence to institutional policies. This involves thoroughly understanding the admission criteria, the scope of promotional activities allowed, and the ethical guidelines for interacting with prospective students. When faced with situations where there might be pressure to secure enrollment, professionals must remember their duty to represent the institution truthfully and to ensure that all applicants are treated fairly and equitably according to established procedures. Question 11. The risk matrix shows a high probability of soil erosion and water scarcity impacting future crop yields at the Adolfo Matthei Agrarian Professional Institute. Given limited immediate capital, which of the following represents the most professionally responsible course of action to address these identified risks? Option A. Invest the available capital in experimental, cutting-edge agricultural technologies that promise high returns, but have not yet been widely tested for their long-term impact on soil and water resources. Option B. Focus all available capital on purchasing higher-yield seed varieties and advanced fertilizers to maximize current harvest, deferring any investment in soil or water management until future profits are realized. Option C. Allocate a portion of the available capital to implement immediate, proven soil conservation techniques and invest in efficient irrigation systems, prioritizing long-term land health and resource sustainability. Option D. Delay any significant investment in risk mitigation, citing current budget limitations, and wait for external funding opportunities or a more favorable economic climate. The correct answer is C. Allocate a portion of the available capital to implement immediate, proven soil conservation techniques and invest in efficient irrigation systems, prioritizing long-term land health and resource sustainability. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for resources with the long-term sustainability of agricultural practices, a core concern for the Adolfo Matthei Agrarian Professional Institute. The decision-maker must consider not only economic viability, but also environmental stewardship and adherence to the Institute's foundational principles, which are implicitly guided by Chilean agricultural regulations and best practices. Careful judgment is required to avoid short-sighted decisions that could compromise future productivity or violate ethical commitments to sustainable land use. The correct approach involves prioritizing the implementation of risk mitigation strategies that align with the Institute's mandate for sustainable agriculture and environmental protection. This means investing in soil conservation techniques, water management systems, and biodiversity promotion, even if these require initial capital outlay. This approach is justified by the implicit regulatory framework governing agricultural institutions in Chile, which emphasizes responsible land management and the long-term health of the agricultural sector. It reflects a commitment to the Institute's educational mission by demonstrating best practices in sustainable farming. An incorrect approach would be to solely focus on maximizing immediate crop yield by neglecting soil health and water conservation. This fails to address the risks identified in the matrix concerning soil degradation and water scarcity, potentially leading to long-term economic and environmental damage. Such an approach would contravene the spirit of agricultural professionalism and the implicit regulatory expectation of sustainable land use. Another incorrect approach would be to defer all investment in risk mitigation due to budget constraints without exploring alternative funding or phased implementation plans. This demonstrates a lack of proactive risk management and a failure to prioritize long-term sustainability, which is a fundamental ethical and professional responsibility for an agrarian institution. A further incorrect approach would be to adopt unproven or experimental mitigation techniques without adequate research or pilot testing. While innovation is important, the Institute's mandate requires a responsible and evidence-based approach to agricultural practices, ensuring that adopted methods are effective and do not introduce new, unforeseen risks. Professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a thorough assessment of identified risks, a clear understanding of the institution's mission and regulatory obligations, and the evaluation of potential mitigation strategies against these criteria. Professionals should consider the long-term implications of their decisions, seeking to balance immediate needs with sustainable practices and ethical responsibilities. This often involves consulting with experts, exploring diverse funding options, and adopting a phased, evidence-based approach to implementation. Question 12. The control framework reveals a potential breach of examination integrity during the Adolfo Matthei Agrarian Professional Institute entrance exam, where a candidate appears to be receiving unauthorized assistance. What is the most appropriate course of action for an invigilator to take? Option A. Ignore the observed behavior to avoid confrontation and potential disruption to other candidates. Option B. Approach the candidate and confiscate their examination materials, then discuss the incident with other invigilators. Option C. Politely inform the candidate that they are suspected of cheating and instruct them to cease the behavior. Option D. Discreetly document the observed irregularity and report it immediately to the examination supervisor or designated authority according to institute procedures. The correct answer is D. Discreetly document the observed irregularity and report it immediately to the examination supervisor or designated authority according to institute procedures. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge related to the ethical and regulatory obligations of an individual within an agricultural professional institute, specifically concerning the integrity of its entrance examination process. The core of the challenge lies in balancing the need to maintain the fairness and credibility of the examination with potential personal relationships or perceived obligations. Adherence to the Adolfo Matthei Agrarian Professional Institute's internal regulations and general ethical principles governing educational institutions is paramount. The correct approach involves strictly adhering to the established examination protocols and reporting any potential breaches or irregularities through the designated channels. This upholds the principle of fairness to all candidates and preserves the integrity of the admission process, which is a fundamental ethical and regulatory requirement for any educational institution. The Adolfo Matthei Agrarian Professional Institute's internal guidelines, which would govern examination conduct and reporting, would mandate such a course of action to ensure impartiality and prevent any undue advantage. An incorrect approach would be to ignore the observed irregularity, as this constitutes a failure to uphold professional responsibility and could lead to a compromised examination outcome. This violates the implicit trust placed in individuals to act ethically and in accordance with institutional rules. Another incorrect approach would be to directly intervene or attempt to rectify the situation without following established procedures. This bypasses the formal reporting mechanisms designed to ensure thorough and impartial investigation, potentially leading to accusations of bias or improper conduct. Finally, discussing the irregularity with other candidates or unauthorized personnel would breach confidentiality and could create an unfair perception or influence the examination environment, violating ethical standards of discretion and institutional protocol. Professionals in such situations should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to institutional policies and ethical guidelines. This involves identifying the nature of the irregularity, understanding the relevant internal regulations and ethical codes, and then acting through the prescribed reporting channels. Seeking guidance from supervisors or designated ethics officers is also a crucial step when faced with ambiguity or complex situations. The focus should always be on maintaining the integrity of the process and ensuring fair treatment for all participants. Question 13. The performance metrics show a consistent decrease in the average yield of the experimental Matthei gold wheat variety over the last 3 growing seasons, raising concerns about its viability. Which of the following impact assessment approaches would be most appropriate for the Adolfo Matthei Agrarian Professional Institute to adopt? Option A. Conduct a comprehensive, multifactorial analysis of all environmental, agronomic, and management factors that could influence wheat yield, including soil analysis, pest and disease surveys, irrigation records, and historical weather data, to identify the primary drivers of the yield decline. Option B. Initiate a series of broad experimental interventions on the remaining crops, such as introducing new pest control agents and altering planting density, to see if any significant improvement can be achieved. Option C. Immediately cease cultivation of the Matthei Gold variety and reallocate resources to a different, more productive wheat strain based on the observed downward trend. Option D. Focus solely on the recent changes in fertilizer application rates, assuming this is the most probable cause for the yield reduction, and adjust accordingly without further investigation. The correct answer is A. Conduct a comprehensive, multifactorial analysis of all environmental, agronomic, and management factors that could influence wheat yield, including soil analysis, pest and disease surveys, irrigation records, and historical weather data, to identify the primary drivers of the yield decline. Explanation: the performance metrics show a significant decline in crop yields for a specific variety of wheat cultivated by the Adolfo Matthei Agrarian Professional Institute. This scenario is professionally challenging because it directly impacts the Institute's research objectives, educational mission, and potentially its reputation for agricultural innovation. The decision-making process requires a thorough understanding of agricultural best practices, environmental factors, and the Institute's internal protocols for addressing such issues, all within the framework of Chilean agricultural regulations and the Institute's own operational guidelines. The correct approach involves a systematic, data-driven impact assessment that prioritizes identifying the root cause of the yield decline. This includes a comprehensive review of all relevant variables such as soil health, pest and disease prevalence, irrigation efficiency, fertilization practices, and climatic conditions over the period of decline. This approach aligns with the principles of responsible agricultural research and management, emphasizing evidence-based decision-making and continuous improvement. It is ethically sound as it seeks to rectify a problem that affects the Institute's core functions and potentially the broader agricultural community if the research is shared. An incorrect approach would be to immediately attribute the decline to a single factor without proper investigation. For instance, solely blaming a new fertilizer without considering other contributing elements would be a premature and potentially damaging conclusion. This fails to adhere to the scientific method and could lead to misallocation of resources or the implementation of ineffective solutions. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore the performance metrics altogether, assuming the decline is a temporary anomaly. This demonstrates a lack of diligence and a failure to uphold the Institute's commitment to agricultural excellence and continuous learning, potentially violating internal guidelines for performance monitoring and corrective action. A third incorrect approach would be to implement drastic, unproven interventions without consulting relevant experts or adhering to established protocols for experimental agricultural practices. This could lead to unintended consequences, environmental damage, or a violation of any applicable Chilean agricultural regulations concerning the introduction of new practices or substances. Professionals should approach such situations by first acknowledging the data, then initiating a structured investigation. This involves forming a multidisciplinary team, defining clear objectives for the assessment, gathering all pertinent data, analyzing it rigorously, and developing evidence-based recommendations. The process should be transparent and documented, allowing for accountability and future reference. Question 14. The performance metrics show a significant increase in student enrollment interest in specialized agricultural technology programs, prompting a discussion about expanding these offerings. Considering the Adolfo Matthei Agrarian Professional Institute's mission and resource constraints, which approach to assessing the potential impact of this expansion would be most appropriate? Option A. Focus on the potential for increased tuition revenue as the primary indicator of success for the expansion. Option B. A quick survey of current students and faculty to gauge their immediate enthusiasm for new technology courses. Option C. A detailed analysis of potential positive and negative consequences across academic, operational, financial, and community engagement dimensions, considering both short-term and long-term effects. Option D. An assessment based on the popularity of similar programs at other institutions, without specific regard to the Adolfo Matthei Agrarian Professional Institute's unique context. The correct answer is C. A detailed analysis of potential positive and negative consequences across academic, operational, financial, and community engagement dimensions, considering both short-term and long-term effects. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to interpret and apply the principles of impact assessment within the specific context of an Agrarian Professional Institute's entrance exam, adhering strictly to its regulatory framework. The challenge lies in identifying the most appropriate method for evaluating the potential consequences of a proposed change, ensuring that the chosen approach aligns with the Institute's operational and ethical guidelines, even if not explicitly detailed in the prompt. Careful judgment is required to distinguish between superficial analysis and a robust, institutionally relevant assessment. The correct approach involves a comprehensive evaluation of potential positive and negative effects, considering both direct and indirect consequences on the Institute's core mission, its students, faculty, and the broader agricultural community it serves. This aligns with the implicit regulatory expectation of responsible institutional development and resource allocation, which would necessitate understanding the full spectrum of impacts before implementing changes. The justification for this approach is rooted in the principle of informed decision-making, which is a cornerstone of any professional or academic institution aiming for sustainable growth and effectiveness. It ensures that decisions are not made in a vacuum, but are grounded in a thorough understanding of their ramifications, thereby upholding the Institute's commitment to its stakeholders and its educational objectives. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate, easily quantifiable benefits overlooks the potential for unforeseen negative consequences, such as long-term reputational damage or a decline in the quality of education, which could violate the spirit of responsible institutional governance. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes only the most visible or popular outcomes fails to conduct a balanced assessment, potentially leading to decisions that are not in the best long-term interest of the Institute or its mission. A third incorrect approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or personal opinions rather than systematic analysis lacks the rigor expected in an academic and professional setting, failing to meet the standards of evidence-based decision-making. These failures represent a disregard for due diligence and a potential breach of the ethical obligations to act in the best interest of the institution and its stakeholders. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve clearly defining the scope of the impact assessment, identifying all relevant stakeholders, gathering data from reliable sources, analyzing both positive and negative impacts, considering mitigation strategies for negative impacts, and clearly communicating the findings to relevant decision-makers. This structured approach ensures that all critical aspects are considered, leading to more informed and responsible outcomes. Question 15. The monitoring system demonstrates a significant increase in student engagement with online learning resources outside of scheduled class times, but also reveals a pattern of late-night access to academic support forums by a small cohort of students. What is the most appropriate course of action for the Adolfo Matthei Agrarian Professional Institute to take in response to this data? Option A. Disregard the late-night forum access data as it pertains to a small group and focus solely on the overall increase in engagement with online resources. Option B. Analyze the data to identify systemic barriers to student success and develop targeted, supportive interventions for students struggling with time management or course material, while ensuring all individual data remains confidential. Option C. Increase the frequency of monitoring of student online activity to identify specific instances of non-compliance with study expectations. Option D. Immediately flag the students accessing academic support forums late at night for individual counseling sessions to address potential academic disengagement or personal issues. The correct answer is B. Analyze the data to identify systemic barriers to student success and develop targeted, supportive interventions for students struggling with time management or course material, while ensuring all individual data remains confidential. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the Adolfo Matthei Agrarian Professional Institute to balance the need for continuous improvement and data-driven decision-making with the ethical imperative to protect the privacy and dignity of its students and staff. The monitoring system, while potentially valuable for identifying areas of operational inefficiency or student support needs, can also be perceived as intrusive if not implemented and utilized with extreme care. The challenge lies in extracting actionable insights without creating a climate of surveillance or compromising confidentiality. The correct approach involves a nuanced analysis of the data, focusing on aggregated trends and patterns rather than individual behaviors, and ensuring that any identified issues are addressed through supportive and educational interventions rather than punitive measures. This aligns with the principles of responsible data stewardship and the ethical obligations of an educational institution to foster a safe and respectful learning environment. Specifically, the regulatory framework governing educational institutions in Chile, as interpreted by the Ministry of Education and relevant data protection laws, emphasizes the protection of personal data and the use of technology for the benefit of student development and institutional improvement, not for surveillance. The focus on identifying systemic issues and informing policy adjustments, while respecting individual privacy, is paramount. An incorrect approach would be to use the monitoring system to identify and discipline individual students or staff based on their usage patterns or perceived deviations from norms. This would constitute a significant breach of privacy and could lead to a climate of fear and distrust, undermining the educational mission. Such an approach would violate the spirit and letter of data protection regulations, which mandate that data be collected and processed for specific, legitimate purposes, and not used in ways that are disproportionate or harmful to individuals. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore the data entirely, thereby missing opportunities for genuine improvement and failing to address potential systemic issues that could negatively impact the student body. This would represent a dereliction of the institution's duty to provide effective and responsive educational services. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes ethical considerations and regulatory compliance. This involves a thorough understanding of the relevant legal and ethical guidelines, a clear definition of the purpose and scope of any monitoring, and a commitment to transparency and accountability. Before implementing or utilizing any monitoring system, a comprehensive impact assessment should be conducted, considering potential risks and benefits. Data analysis should always be conducted with a focus on aggregate trends and anonymized information, and any interventions should be designed to be supportive and educational, respecting individual rights and dignity. Question 16. The performance metrics show a significant disparity in the success rates of applicants from different agricultural regions applying to the Adolfo Matthei Agrarian Professional Institute. Which approach best addresses this situation while adhering to the Institute's regulatory framework and ethical guidelines for admissions? Option A. Conduct a detailed review of the performance metrics to identify specific regions or applicant profiles exhibiting lower success rates, and then develop targeted outreach programs for those identified groups. Option B. Share the performance metrics with regional agricultural associations to solicit their feedback on potential reasons for the observed disparities, without revealing individual applicant data. Option C. Analyze the aggregated performance metrics to identify systemic factors within the admissions process that might be contributing to disparities, such as the clarity of application instructions or the relevance of assessment criteria, and propose process improvements. Option D. Discontinue the collection of performance metrics related to applicant origin to avoid any potential for bias or misinterpretation in future admission cycles. The correct answer is A. Conduct a detailed review of the performance metrics to identify specific regions or applicant profiles exhibiting lower success rates, and then develop targeted outreach programs for those identified groups. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the immediate need for information with the ethical and regulatory obligations to protect sensitive data and ensure fair competition. The Adolfo Matthei Agrarian Professional Institute entrance exam, like many academic institutions, operates under strict guidelines regarding the handling of applicant data and the integrity of its admissions process. The challenge lies in interpreting performance metrics without breaching confidentiality or creating an unfair advantage. The correct approach involves a careful, aggregated analysis of performance metrics that focuses on identifying broad trends and areas for improvement in the admissions process itself, rather than singling out individual applicants or groups. This approach aligns with the principles of data privacy and fairness inherent in educational admissions regulations. By focusing on systemic improvements, the Institute upholds its commitment to a transparent and equitable selection process, ensuring that all applicants are evaluated based on established criteria without undue influence from potentially sensitive performance data. This method respects the confidentiality of applicant information and prevents the misuse of data for discriminatory purposes. An incorrect approach would be to analyze performance metrics in a way that identifies specific applicant groups or individuals based on their performance data. This could lead to profiling or discriminatory practices, violating ethical standards and potentially specific regulations governing educational institutions that prohibit the use of sensitive personal information in a manner that disadvantages applicants. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore the performance metrics entirely, as this would forego an opportunity to improve the admissions process and potentially identify systemic issues that could be addressed to benefit future applicants. This failure to act on available data, when it can be analyzed ethically and responsibly, represents a missed opportunity for institutional enhancement and adherence to best practices in admissions management. Professionals in this situation should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes ethical considerations and regulatory compliance. This involves first identifying the purpose of analyzing the performance metrics. Is it for process improvement or applicant evaluation? If for process improvement, the focus should be on aggregated, anonymized data. If the data could potentially identify individuals or groups, a thorough review of relevant privacy policies and admissions regulations is paramount. The decision-making process should involve consulting with relevant stakeholders, such as the admissions committee and legal counsel, to ensure that any analysis and subsequent actions are fully compliant and ethically sound. The ultimate goal is to leverage data for constructive institutional development while rigorously safeguarding applicant rights and the integrity of the admissions process. Question 17. The performance metrics show a significant increase in student enrollment interest in specialized agricultural technology courses, prompting the Adolfo Matthei Agrarian Professional Institute to consider developing new, advanced modules for its curriculum. When assessing the potential impact of this curriculum expansion, which approach best aligns with the Institute's mission and responsible institutional development? Option A. An assessment based on informal discussions and anecdotal feedback from a few faculty members. Option B. An assessment focused primarily on the immediate cost savings associated with developing new course materials. Option C. A comprehensive impact assessment that evaluates potential effects on student learning outcomes, industry relevance, institutional reputation, and resource allocation. Option D. An assessment prioritizing the perceived popularity of the new modules among a select group of current students. The correct answer is C. A comprehensive impact assessment that evaluates potential effects on student learning outcomes, industry relevance, institutional reputation, and resource allocation. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to interpret and apply the principles of impact assessment within the specific context of an Agrarian Professional Institute's entrance exam, adhering strictly to its regulatory framework. The challenge lies in identifying the most appropriate method for evaluating the potential consequences of a proposed initiative, ensuring that the chosen approach aligns with the Institute's objectives and any governing regulations. Even if not explicitly stated in the question itself, the underlying principle is to assess impact in a manner relevant to an educational institution focused on agriculture. Careful judgment is required to distinguish between superficial analysis and a robust assessment that considers various dimensions of impact. The correct approach involves a comprehensive evaluation that considers both positive and negative consequences across multiple domains relevant to an agrarian professional institute. This includes assessing the potential impact on student learning outcomes, the practical applicability of the curriculum to the agricultural sector, the institute's reputation within the agrarian community, and the efficient allocation of institutional resources. This approach is professionally sound because it aligns with the core mission of an educational institution to foster knowledge, skills, and professional development relevant to its field. It also implicitly adheres to principles of good governance and responsible resource management, which are foundational to any professional organization. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate cost savings fails to consider the broader, long-term implications for the Institute's educational mission and its stakeholders. This overlooks potential negative impacts on the quality of education or the relevance of its programs, which could undermine its standing in the agrarian sector. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes only the perceived popularity among a small group of current students neglects the diverse needs of prospective students, faculty, and the wider agricultural industry that the institute serves. This narrow focus can lead to decisions that are not strategically aligned with the institute's long-term goals. An approach that relies on anecdotal evidence without systematic data collection is also flawed, as it lacks the rigor necessary for informed decision-making and can be subjective and unreliable. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with clearly defining the scope and objectives of the impact assessment. This involves identifying all relevant stakeholders and potential areas of impact. Next, appropriate assessment methodologies should be selected, ensuring they are systematic, evidence-based, and tailored to the specific context. The data collected should be analyzed objectively, considering both quantitative and qualitative factors. Finally, the findings should be used to inform a well-reasoned decision that balances various considerations and aligns with the organization's strategic goals and ethical responsibilities. Question 18. The performance metrics show a correlation between certain pre-admission assessment scores and subsequent student success in the Adolfo Matthei Agrarian Professional Institute's programs. Considering the institute's commitment to equitable access and the regulatory framework governing admissions, which approach to utilizing these metrics is most appropriate for an impact assessment? Option A. Conduct a detailed impact assessment to understand how these metrics might affect different applicant demographics, identify potential biases, and explore how to use them to enhance program support rather than solely for exclusion, while ensuring compliance with all relevant admissions regulations. Option B. Focus on the quantitative correlation to justify increasing the difficulty of entry requirements for all programs, without further investigation into the underlying reasons for the observed success. Option C. Immediately implement the pre-admission assessment scores as a primary factor in ranking and selecting applicants to ensure only the most successful candidates are admitted. Option D. Discard the performance metrics entirely, as any quantitative measure could be perceived as unfair or discriminatory, and rely solely on qualitative assessments. The correct answer is A. Conduct a detailed impact assessment to understand how these metrics might affect different applicant demographics, identify potential biases, and explore how to use them to enhance program support rather than solely for exclusion, while ensuring compliance with all relevant admissions regulations. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the immediate need for information with the ethical and regulatory obligations to protect sensitive data and ensure fair access to opportunities. The Adolfo Matthei Agrarian Professional Institute, like any educational institution, operates under specific regulations regarding student admissions and data privacy. The challenge lies in interpreting performance metrics in a way that is both informative for institutional improvement and compliant with these regulations. The correct approach involves a comprehensive impact assessment that considers the potential consequences of using performance metrics for admissions decisions. This approach is right because it aligns with the principles of fairness, transparency, and data protection, which are fundamental to ethical admissions processes. Specifically, it necessitates evaluating how these metrics might inadvertently disadvantage certain groups of applicants, ensuring that their use does not create barriers to entry that are not directly related to the academic and professional requirements of the agrarian programs. This aligns with the spirit of equitable access to education, a core tenet of institutional responsibility. An incorrect approach would be to directly use raw performance metrics to rank or filter applicants without a thorough assessment of their implications. This fails to consider the potential for bias inherent in any metric and overlooks the regulatory requirement to ensure admissions processes are fair and non-discriminatory. Another incorrect approach would be to disregard the performance metrics entirely, even if they offer valuable insights into program effectiveness and applicant preparedness. This would be a failure to leverage data for continuous improvement and could lead to missed opportunities to refine admissions criteria and support systems, potentially hindering the institute's ability to select candidates best suited for its programs. A third incorrect approach would be to focus solely on the quantitative aspects of the metrics without considering the qualitative context or the broader impact on the applicant pool. thereby neglecting the holistic evaluation required for responsible admissions. Professionals should approach such situations by first identifying the relevant institutional policies and any applicable national or regional educational regulations. They should then conduct a structured impact assessment, considering potential benefits and risks, particularly concerning fairness, equity, and data privacy. This assessment should involve diverse stakeholders, including admissions officers, academic staff, and potentially legal or compliance experts, to ensure a well-rounded evaluation. The decision-making process should prioritize transparency, fairness, and adherence to regulatory frameworks, ensuring that any use of performance metrics serves the best interests of both the applicants and the institution. Question 19. The performance metrics show a significant decline in crop yield for a staple agricultural product over the past 3 growing seasons, alongside an increase in pest resistance to commonly used treatments. Considering the Adolfo Matthei Agrarian Professional Institute's commitment to sustainable and responsible agricultural practices, which of the following approaches best addresses this situation? Option A. Initiate a comprehensive impact assessment to evaluate the environmental, social, and economic implications of various interventions, including exploring alternative pest management strategies, soil health improvements, and crop diversification, while consulting relevant agricultural regulations and best practices. Option B. Rely on traditional farming knowledge passed down through generations without formal investigation. Assuming the decline is a temporary cyclical issue. Option C. Immediately implement a more potent, broad-spectrum pesticide, as this has historically led to quick pest control in similar situations, and focus on maximizing immediate yield recovery. Option D. Propose a significant shift to a completely different high-demand crop that is less susceptible to current pests, without a thorough analysis of market stability or the suitability of the land for the new crop. The correct answer is A. Initiate a comprehensive impact assessment to evaluate the environmental, social, and economic implications of various interventions, including exploring alternative pest management strategies, soil health improvements, and crop diversification, while consulting relevant agricultural regulations and best practices. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate needs of the agricultural sector with the long-term sustainability and regulatory compliance mandated by the Adolfo Matthei Agrarian Professional Institute's governing framework. The Institute's entrance exam, by its nature, assesses a candidate's foundational understanding of principles relevant to agrarian professions, including their awareness of responsible resource management and adherence to established guidelines. A candidate's ability to interpret performance metrics and propose appropriate actions reflects their potential to contribute positively and ethically to the agricultural field. The correct approach involves a comprehensive impact assessment that considers environmental, social, and economic factors, aligning with the principles of sustainable agriculture and the ethical responsibilities inherent in agrarian professions as implicitly guided by the Institute's educational objectives. This approach prioritizes a thorough understanding of potential consequences before implementing changes, ensuring that proposed solutions are not only effective in the short term, but also responsible and compliant with the spirit of agricultural stewardship. This aligns with the Institute's likely emphasis on producing professionals who are not only technically proficient, but also ethically grounded and aware of their broader societal and environmental impact. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate productivity gains without considering broader implications fails to acknowledge the regulatory and ethical imperative for sustainable practices. Such an approach risks violating implicit or explicit guidelines concerning environmental protection and long-term resource viability, which are fundamental to agrarian education. Another incorrect approach that proposes solutions based on anecdotal evidence or personal bias, rather than a structured assessment, demonstrates a lack of professional rigor and an inability to apply systematic problem-solving methods. This directly contradicts the analytical skills expected of candidates entering a professional institute. Finally, an approach that overlooks potential negative social impacts on local communities or agricultural workers demonstrates a narrow and incomplete understanding of the multifaceted nature of agrarian development, failing to meet the holistic standards of responsible professional conduct. Professionals should approach such situations by first identifying the core problem or opportunity presented by the performance metrics. They must then engage in a systematic process of information gathering, considering all relevant internal and external factors. This includes consulting applicable regulations, ethical guidelines, and best practices. The next step involves evaluating potential courses of action through a structured impact assessment, weighing the benefits against the risks, and considering the long-term consequences. Finally, the decision-making process should be transparent, justifiable, and aligned with the overarching goals of sustainability, ethical conduct, and regulatory compliance. Question 20. Process analysis reveals that the Adolfo Matthei Agrarian Professional Institute is considering implementing new admissions criteria for its agricultural technology programs. These criteria include a mandatory essay on personal motivation for an agricultural career and a practical skills demonstration involving basic soil preparation. The Institute's admissions committee is concerned about ensuring these criteria are fair and effective in selecting candidates most likely to succeed. Which of the following approaches best addresses the potential impact of these new criteria on the applicant pool and ensures compliance with educational fairness principles? Option A. Conduct a thorough impact assessment of the proposed essay and practical skills demonstration on diverse applicant demographics, analyzing potential disparities in access and performance, and developing strategies to mitigate any identified adverse effects to ensure equitable selection. Option B. Establish stringent minimum grade point averages from secondary education, focusing solely on academic performance as the primary determinant of suitability for the program. Option C. Prioritize applicants who have demonstrable, extensive prior experience working on commercial farms, assuming this directly correlates with a higher likelihood of success in the program. Option D. Implement a system where admissions officers subjectively score the passion and dedication of applicants based on informal interviews, believing this captures essential qualities for agricultural professionals. The correct answer is A. Conduct a thorough impact assessment of the proposed essay and practical skills demonstration on diverse applicant demographics, analyzing potential disparities in access and performance, and developing strategies to mitigate any identified adverse effects to ensure equitable selection. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because the Adolfo Matthei Agrarian Professional Institute, as an educational institution, has a responsibility to ensure its admissions processes are fair, transparent, and comply with national educational regulations. The challenge lies in balancing the need to assess candidates' potential for success in an agrarian program with the imperative to avoid discriminatory practices or the use of criteria not directly relevant to academic or professional suitability. Careful judgment is required to select assessment methods that are predictive of success without introducing bias. The correct approach involves a comprehensive impact assessment that considers the potential effects of the proposed admissions criteria on different demographic groups and the overall fairness of the selection process. This aligns with the principles of equitable access to education and non-discrimination, which are fundamental to educational policy and ethical practice in Chile. Specifically, it requires evaluating whether the chosen criteria, such as prior agricultural experience or specific aptitude tests, disproportionately disadvantage certain groups of applicants who may possess equivalent potential but lack the same opportunities for early exposure. The goal is to identify and mitigate any adverse impacts that could lead to unfair exclusion, ensuring that the admissions process is both effective and compliant with the spirit and letter of educational regulations governing professional institutes. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the perceived practicality of prior experience without considering its accessibility to all socioeconomic backgrounds fails to acknowledge potential systemic disadvantages. This could lead to the exclusion of talented individuals from less privileged rural areas who may not have had the same opportunities for formal or informal agricultural engagement. Such an approach risks violating principles of equal opportunity. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes subjective assessments of passion for agriculture without standardized, objective evaluation criteria opens the door to bias and inconsistency. This can lead to arbitrary decisions that are difficult to justify and may not accurately reflect a candidate's true potential or suitability for the program, potentially contravening guidelines for fair and transparent assessment. A third incorrect approach that relies on narrowly defined academic prerequisites that do not account for diverse educational backgrounds or alternative learning pathways could unfairly exclude capable students. This fails to recognize that potential can be demonstrated through various means and may not align with the inclusive admission policies expected of educational institutions. A professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic evaluation of proposed admissions criteria against established principles of fairness, equity, and non-discrimination. This includes conducting an impact assessment to identify potential adverse effects on different applicant groups. If adverse impacts are identified, mitigation strategies should be developed and implemented. Furthermore, the process should prioritize objective, measurable criteria that are directly relevant to the program's learning outcomes and professional requirements, while also allowing for flexibility to accommodate diverse applicant backgrounds and experiences. Transparency in the admissions process and clear communication of criteria to prospective students are also crucial components of professional decision-making.